Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile video. Today we're here with Ned, who took third place at the London DBS Fest with Red Yellow Baby of all things. So Ned, firstly, how's it going, man?
I'm good. Yeah, really happy with my placement. Was really excited to play this deck again.
Absolutely, as you definitely should be. So, a couple questions first. How many players did you guys end up having at the fest?
I can't remember exact numbers. I think it was somewhere between 30 to 40 due to leads happening the day before, but the player caliber was quite high.
Gotcha, and it was a sideboard best of one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool, cool. And you had to take a third place with Red Yellow Baby of all things. So, what made you want to play this deck? I know you mentioned you had a lot of testing going into it, but why this deck in particular?
Yeah, so my friend and I, we test a lot, and we've always kept our eye on this deck, as you know, it may be a sleeper pick for a really aggro format that might come up in the future. And going into this format with best of one sideboarding, the decks that are running around, we thought this might be the format to really push it and see what this deck can do. And in testing, it was working out really well. It has some really favorable matchups at the moment, so try it out.
Cool. So before we get into the list, since you brought it up, do you want to mention some of those matchups where you think this is like a favorable deck?
Yeah, sure. One really favorable matchup would be U7 Goku. I tested against it and then played free on the day, and it felt like an incredibly good matchup for the deck. Uh, Soul Striker in all the testing, it actually skewed towards this. It was just so aggro that it killed them before they could set up. Even like Control Sin, it does pretty good against. It did really badly against Aggro Sin, but that was my mistakes.
Gotcha. All right, so let's start taking a look at this deck. So we have the leader, which, if you guys don't know, is basically a dual attacking leader for the most part. But on your awakened turn, you can get 3 attacks off with your leader. Is that right? If I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, so you swing with the Unawakened, then just activate his main to restand him, then just awaken. So 3 attacks off him.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's been a little while since I played this leader, so I'm trying to pull some of the stuff from memory. But going into the main board, we have 4 copies of Dr. Mew. Definitely just sets up your graceful charity combo, which we'll see later. 4 copies of Janemba, Hatred, Evil Personified. So yeah, this deck took some big hits. A lot of them like kind of indirectly that we'll see in a bit. But this card was a more recent piece of support, and I think it actually helps tie the deck together a lot. So I don't know, like, just a random question. Would you call this card one of like the sort of MVPs?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like this was coming out every game. There's certain times where you'd bring it out, and I'd even just even the offering would whiff sometimes, but it didn't matter because it's a 16k body that just comes out for free.
Right. Yeah, and now free play is like so hard to find, so wherever you can get it, it's pretty good. Yeah. And then we have 2 of our big bosses. So you're only playing 2 copies of Baby Evil Lifeform, so that kind of leads me to believe it's not like your main boss monster, or is it still your main boss and 2 copies was like more than enough?
Yeah, it's still probably the main boss, but there are a few other things in the deck. But the main thing was the deck in testing was just being so consistent, and it would turn up. I think I brought it out every game of the DBS Fest, and it works. Like the card is just so good still.
Gotcha. And you are able to search it with the Baby Janemba that we just talked about. And then your 1 copy of Please. So with this card being at 1, were you able to find it enough? Were you able to find it off your Baby Janemba? Did you see it when you needed it?
Yeah, like the deck draws so much that I saw play most games, and it's heartfelt. Like it's still really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you can pull this card off, it's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, and I should mention too, this is a 51 card list, which I find very interesting too, because I think it was Aspira was messing around with this deck, and I want to say his list was around like 55 cards maybe, and I could tell that it was like very hard to trim ratios and make sure you're playing the cards you want to play. But yeah, you got it down to a very consistent number, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And then 4 copies of Super Baby, just a free play when your opponent takes a certain amount of damage. It makes a lot of sense. For All-Consuming Terror, your main arrival that sets up all of your other baby plays. For Evil Origin, this is with the Dr. Mew, kind of sets up your graceful charity combo, which makes a lot of sense. And then 4 copies of Super Baby Parasitic Menace. Yep. So this all definitely seems pretty standard. So what turn were you mostly looking to bring in All-Consuming Terror? Was it just your standard turn 2, or?
Oh yeah, it was every turn two he was coming out and try to make him into Power Stage Menace and just pressure them really quickly, then bring out a Conqueror and just do so much damage.
Yeah, that's
Like
a lot. That's definitely a lot.
yeah, I don't think I had any game go further than turn four. Every game that I won was won on turn two or three. So
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's like nowadays with aggro being in the way it is, like, you know, King Piccolo, Gogeta Zeno being like the two quote unquote premier aggro decks, like you're not winning any earlier than turn 3 usually. But yeah, this deck
yeah.
has turn 2 potential. That's definitely pretty wild. And then we have 2 copies of Baby Vengeful Rampage. So this is, I believe this card came out in the starter deck, and it's been more of like a niche boss monster for this deck. I believe it does something along the lines of coming in and negating all your opponent's battle card effects, right?
Yeah, so it negates their effects, ignoring barrier, and they also can't combo with them. So this card was mainly in there for Trunks Vegeta and the yellow matchups, and because it would come down, because this deck really struggles against like blocker removal. So the main thing was to play this, just make sure that they couldn't block and just keep pushing. And he's 25k dual attack offering. So he came up. If it was just a bad matchup when like the leaders went down, I would just side him out. But in the matchups he was useful for, he was MVP definitely.
Gotcha. So here's another question. So when you would play a lot of these guys, because offering is a keyword we don't see a lot nowadays, would you find that your opponents were more often letting you draw 2 cards than like critting a life?
They were actually critting a life. It was really weird. Because the deck has such a big hand size already that by the time offering would come out, I'd be on like 8, 9, sometimes 7 cards, and they would just crit the life, not want me to just super combo them to death.
I see. Yeah, it does put you in a bind sometimes. Like sometimes, you know, back when offering came out, people said, "Oh, you always let them draw 2 no matter what." But like there are some sticky situations where like critting the life is sort of okay, but yeah, it's definitely a tough call most of the time.
Yeah.
And then 1 copy of Apocalypse Grudge Grade A Baby. So, yeah, talk to me about this one. Why just the 1 copy?
Because there's only one way to play it, sadly, which is off the 5 drop. But he is searchable off of sorry. And when he comes out, he's just the people don't expect him, and he is such a just 30k triple strike, and his auto. It's not good against yellow, so it would side it out against that. But in the red matchups, the first battle card they play gets minus 20'd. So usually, like if I played against KP or U7 Goku, I'd bring this out strategically to the point where I would know, okay, their next free play, it's not matter because it's going to die. You know, or their cheapest thing, it's going to die.
Right.
So, yeah, it worked really well.
Nice. And then 1 Power for Super Saiyan, of course, that's all we can play. 2 Krillin Super Combo, and 2 Whis Super Combo. So I'm assuming the Whis is more or less just to help you kind of like a rival, right?
Yeah, because in testing against Trunks Vegeta, Mew would get rested a lot because of the Trunks. So I wanted to make sure that even when he was rested, I could still rival, still apply some pressure. So the Whis definitely helped.
Gotcha. So you'd probably keep the Super Combo lineup the same?
Yeah, definitely.
Gotcha. Yeah, actually, Red Yellow definitely needs one of those free combo cards. They still don't have one, right?
I don't think so, no. It's just the Whis.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. But anyways, 3 copies of Steadfast, one of the best cards in yellow for sure. 3 copies of Blitzwave Generator. So this obviously is pretty nice synergistically because it's a yellow extra card that turns on your Steadfast and your Riposte.
Yeah.
Did you ever like whiff on this card? I know that's always a big concern for baby players.
No, I never whiffed. It was always active. If I could just say something about the Steadfast, actually, because it was a weird reason for playing that. I never used it defensively. The only times it was ever coming up, and because I planned for it, was to have it offensively. So if the opponent was to say play, this came up quite a few times, of Oceanus. And the annoying thing is that of her blocker, rather than the mill 4, I didn't really mind that. But just to be able to ensure that she'd come out, not get blocked, and not be able to block something, that was the main thing for playing Steadfast, and like at that, he's also just 5k combo to make sure that the blocker gets rested.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, I didn't consider, so I'm glad you went back to that. Yeah, Oceanus, when she comes down, like, sometimes, yeah, your deck doesn't really care about the milling, especially if you can kill them rather quickly after that. But yeah, her being a blocker after being played is pretty annoying. So that's actually, I'm glad you bring that up, because people who want to play this deck are definitely going to want to be aware of that. 2 copies of Turles All Too Easy, so only 2 copies, I'm assuming, because, you know, you have like a pretty thick engine here and for space reasons, or how did Turles do for you?
Yeah, he's pretty good. You just you filter enough to see him, and like 2 energy can be kind of expensive for the deck. So, you know, you have things like the 30k costing 2, the other 5 job costing 2. But the 2 copies of him, I felt that the ratios were good. You know, he comes up when you need him to.
Nice. And then 2 Basil Fatal Rampage, just probably the best aggressive 1-drop for yellow, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yep.
So good.
1 Realm of the Gods Black Kamehameha. So I guess we'll just finish out the rest here. So only 1 Realm and 1 Power. So that gives us a total of what, 3, 4, 5 yellow extra cards, if I'm counting that right.
Yeah.
Did you find that was enough to make sure that your Riposte and your Steadfast were online?
Yeah. So because normally the Graceful Charity, I'd get 1, and if I drew into a Bloods, I'd discard it. And a Bloods is also just a really easy, like, turn 2. So my Ripostes and Steadfast are almost always live. The reason for only 1 Black Kamehameha was because when I was testing, it would never be used defensively. It would only ever come up offensively against things like Sin, things like that. So, but another card you'll see on the side, where more I tested it, the more I was like, okay, this utility-wise is coming up far more often than Kamehameha, but I still wanted to play 1, definitely. So it's definitely ratios I want to mess around with.
Cool. And then last question for the main deck. Why the Wicked Sands? Why was that the SCR of choice?
Sadly, I don't have access to a pan.
Yeah,
So
I was
when
thinking
I
that
was
would be like the perfect one for this deck.
Yeah, but when I was looking at the options I had, I was like, okay, offensively, it's a free 10k combo, which 9 times out of 10 was what was best about it, and then it's just tap 2 for a 40k dual attacker.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree that Pan is probably the best call here, just because you have all this free play in the deck. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have it, this is probably a good answer. I think Supreme Kai might also be solid, just because it's a 1-drop 40k body. But yeah, Wicked Sands seems good as well.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, it was another brilliant thing about Wicked is just late into the game, they because we're trying to kill them so early, they're not gonna have enough things to tap down for him, so they're just gonna have to discard 2, which just allows you to push so much harder.
Cool. And then we will go over the side deck. So we have 2 copies of Final Flash. So, okay, so from what you talked about in the main deck, it seems like even your defensive cards, you mostly use them offensively, right? So like your Steadfast, your Realm of the Gods. Final Flash, more of the same, or was this actually for defensive purposes?
Not more of the same, and the same with Forbidden Power, just really offensive. Forbidden Power was really good at just resting down blockers.
Yeah, a lot of people definitely don't realize that second effect of comboing and tapping something, ignoring barrier. Yep.
Yeah, that came up like so often. People just didn't expect it. Same with Final Flash, just classically being able to push for big damage.
Yeah, and then negating like a Sin blocker, I'm assuming, is like a really, really important thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And then 2 copies of Koitsukai. So yeah, I think this card is probably the best side deck card right now. Like, there are just tons of matchups where this gets like a ton of mileage. Did you find yourself bringing it in a lot?
Yeah, oh yeah, pretty much every game. Like, the best use is discarding it off the Graceful Charity, because you don't have to combo with it.
Right.
And like, there was one game where a U7 held out to topo me, but I could see that he had the energy open, so I just let Koitsukoi do the work, and even though he topoed me, I just killed him through it that turn, because such a big hand size.
Right. And then BMS. BMS I feel like is always just more hit or miss. There are some decks it's great against, some decks it's not great against. What did you find yourself bringing this in against mostly?
Mostly Trunks and Vegeta. That's it's the most awkward matchup I had through testing. I didn't get to test that much against it. And BMS, he'd probably leave now, to be honest. Yeah.
So was it not effective in the matchup, or what were you thinking about it?
It was, but then the guy who ended up coming first, who I played against, was teching specifically against BMS
Right.
as well. So it's an awkward thing of like, okay, if they tech against it, the tech becomes dead. So interesting meta though.
Right, for sure. Yeah, because then it's like they're siding hate against the hate. So like, what's the point, right? Yeah, I get what you're saying. To Deborah, which is just hand control coverage, but also it's useful against like if your opponent topos you or whatnot. So that's pretty interesting. Did you ever bring it in for that kind of scenario?
Yeah, it only came up once, and it was that he just didn't expect it, and it just refueled the hand and gave tap down 2 energy. I just awakened after that, just kept pushing.
Nice. All right, so now why don't you just talk to me about all these 1-ofs?
Yeah, sure. So the freezer is I'll probably talk about that last because that was a really bizarre thing I just decided kind of last minute with a friend.
Sure.
The Goku Black is whenever it would come up in testing, so he's almost always going to be live, and most players in testing, they won't negate like the very first attack, because I usually try to leave him on 5 life the first like big few swings, and then on the next turn just 5-0 them. And most players will leave like the 1 energy open or 0 energy open, so that when they untap, their floodgate is live. And no one expected this guy to come out, tap down that last energy, and just ensure a fatal swing.
Gotcha. And oh yeah, and he also has the effect to play from hand, right? Not just the warp, right? So
yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's something that people overlook a lot, because like in the Goku Black deck, you warp him and then play him from the warp, but he can also just be played from your hand.
Yeah, no one expected him, and he came in clutch so many times.
Nice.
The Vegeta was just a solid one of, in case I ever came up again. The deck really dies to slug.
Right.
Like if you get slugged, you really struggle. I only had one because I wasn't expecting too much sort of slug engine, and I was right. Slug just didn't make an appearance in any deck the whole day, thankfully.
Yeah, I don't think people are playing it much in Trunks Vegeta, because their engine takes up so much space,
Yeah, it also just does have like niche things against Trunks and Vegeta, some other decks that you might encounter. So it did come up. I'd keep him there.
Nice.
The one Kami, good one-drop cantrip that also just really helps against Trunks Vegeta, sometimes KP. You have to be careful using it against KP, because they might just, Vegeta counterplay him, so you just got to pick your moments. But, yeah, he came up. Cooler's just, in case you need to really reinforce your, kill turn, just tap 3 for him, then just awaken, untap the 2.
Yeah.
Keep swinging.
I'm a little surprised he's not in the main deck, but I guess it makes sense because you want to keep everything as cheap as possible, right?
Yeah, and most of the time, I was killing him before Cooler could ever come out.
Right.
And then the Freezer, this is a really... Whenever I was playing it in testing, the decks that would draw out to late game would deliberately not attack the leader, and it was an issue I kept encountering in testing of okay, they're stalling me, I can only take 1 life of my own a turn, and they're just trying to build resources, and they would try and stall me constantly, not make sure that I could never awaken. And in the stall, go to late game scenarios, Freezer would come up, I'd just keep my awake until his turn.
Oh, wow, okay.
So he'd come up, he'd come down for 5, the card, it's really good.
Yeah.
And then just awaken and try and push from there.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because your leader actually awakens at 2 life, so being able to stall it like that doesn't seem too difficult, especially if your opponent is really, really being stally with you, for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool, Ned. So it seems like you put a lot of time into this deck, and obviously you were rewarded for it, which is really cool. All right. So any final shout outs you want to throw out there?
Yeah, shout out to my friend Shane. He was the one that really convinced me to go for this deck. He'll have the deck lists for first and second place from the event on his YouTube channel, Black Tide DBS. Shout out to all my mates in the Planet Vegeta Discord server for helping me test, and to my girl Shanice for supporting me throughout the day. So thanks everyone.
Awesome, man. Congratulations again. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, man.